evening, ladies and gentlemen. The title for this speech is Oats, Milling Over the Health Benefits. Now, apologies for that very bad joke in the title. It is a very bad joke, and the correct verb is to mull over in English, not to mill over. So it's not even a good pun. But it was the most interesting title that I could come up with on a Tuesday morning when I've not had my daily, or rather one of my daily, iced coffees. So anyway, today's chosen topic is oats. And why have I chosen this topic? Well, because National Oatmeal Day is coming up. And in honor of that, I thought it would be fun to look at some of the health benefits of oats and also have a look at what goes on in the milling process, because contrary to what you may think, it's actually really interesting. So firstly, oatmeal is a whole grain. So even when it's processed, and regardless of even how it's processed, it's never completely stripped of its nutritious bran. So that means that oatmeal contains both soluble and insoluble fibre. As I'm sure you know, fibre is very good for you. It's what prevents illnesses such as colon cancer and also discomfort such as constipation. So the soluble fibre in the oatmeal, what it does is it forms a sort of viscous gel, and that in turn helps to lower cholesterol, and it also stabilizes blood glucose levels. So the insoluble fibre actually improves your intestinal health. It aids the working of your guts, and that in turn is what prevents or can cure discomfort such as constipation. So the fibre in oatmeal is actually called beta-glucan, and it's actually recommended that if you eat 3 grams of oat fibre a day, that can actually lower your cholesterol by between 8 and 23%. So you can see that eating oats is actually incredibly good for you. In fact, it's actually not very well known how beneficial oats are for your body. But there's more than that. In fact, oats can prevent even more serious illnesses like coronary heart disease, colon cancer, as we've just talked about, and even breast cancer. It can protect you against strokes and heart attacks. So there's actually a study done in the US. And according to that study, the fibre that you get from oatmeal can actually reduce your risk of getting a stroke or a heart attack by between 10 and 15%, which is actually pretty considerable when you think about it. So the study was done on 10,000 adults. Their dietary habits were analysed, and it was found that those who ate the most fibre from oats actually ran a far lower risk of getting a stroke or a heart attack. And oats contain a lot of fibre. The International Journal of Epidemiology actually predicts that premenopausal women who eat fibre and who eat particularly fibre that comes from oats have half the risk of developing breast cancer. So you can see that oats are actually incredibly beneficial, not even slightly beneficial, but very beneficial for you. But oats also contain a variety of antioxidants. In fact, they contain a special kind of antioxidant called avenanthramides. And avenanthramides are found exclusively in oats. Basically, they work as anti-inflammatory substances. So they actually prevent illnesses because chronic inflammation contributes to many of the conditions we were talking about earlier, such as cancer, coronary heart disease, etc. And the avenanthramides actually reduce the inflammation in your heart or in other organs in your body. So I've just given you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how beneficial oats are, the health benefits, but I actually want to come on to the milling process, because I think the milling process is actually one of the most interesting things about oats. The milling of oats is essential. You can't eat oats in their pure form because they would be non-digestible otherwise. Basically, oats have been designed to be biologically and chemically inactive until the proper conditions are met for plant germination. So what it means is oats are a kind of great biological tissue for long-term storage of macronutrients and also micronutrients. So the hull, the outer portion of the oat, is so effective at storing macronutrients and micronutrients that if the hull was consumed without the milling process taking place, the oat would be completely undigestible. So our bodies, it would just go through our bodies without us being able to digest it and take the nutrients from it. So first of all, the oats have to be cleaned. Then they have to be dehulled. So essentially it means that the husks have to be cracked off. But when you're doing this process, you have to be careful not to damage the kernel, because the kernel is what has all the goodness and the richness of nutrients in it. So it's got to be cleaned, then it's dehulled, and then it's kilned. So there's a kilning process. What is the kilning process? Well, it's basically a steam heating process that inactivates certain enzymes. And this is necessary because oats have a very high lipid content. So they contain lots of fatty acids, which is good for your body. But it means that there are these active enzymes called lipase, which actually make the oats very susceptible to rancidity. So they have a very short shelf life, basically. So essentially, you need to go through the kilning process in order to give the oats a better shelf life and to increase the moisture content. When you do this, when you increase the moisture content, essentially you increase the efficiency of the enzyme inactivation. And the kilning process also gives the oats that nutty, toasty, caramelly flavor that makes it so good to taste. So you go through the kilning process. And then after the kilning and the steaming, the oats are then dried and they're cooled and then they're ready for milling. But the milling process basically depends on what kind of oat you want, basically, because there are several different kinds. The first kind is the steel cut oat. And actually that's probably the most popular one. They tend to be fairly expensive, but these are oats which are basically chopped into 2 or 4 pieces. They tend to be quite chewy. They tend to have more fibre. But aside from that, you've also got so-called rolled oats. And as the name suggests, you just roll them to flatten them out and then you dry them. Then you have instant oats, so which you have to process much more thoroughly. So they go through more steaming and more rolling before being cut. So in conclusion, I just want to leave you with a quote, which I find quite witty. So the literary giant Samuel Johnson's 1755 dictionary defined oats as, I quote, "a grain which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland appears to be given to people." To which Scotsmen would usually retort, "That's why England has such good horses and Scotland such fine men." Thank you for listening.